هذا كتاب أنزلناه مبارك فاتبعوه واتقوا لعلكم ترحمون.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Al-An'am and verse number 108. Verse number 108 from Surah Al-An'am. As you see in front of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله فيسبوا الله عدوا بغير علم كذلك زينا لكل أمة عملهم ثم إلى ربهم مرجعهم فينبئهم بما كانوا يعملون. Which means an insult not those whom they worship besides Allah, lest they insult Allah wrongfully without knowledge. Thus we have made fair seeming to each people its own doings. Then to their Lord is their return, and He shall then inform them of all that they used to do. وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. As mentioned in ayah number 106, the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, اتبع ما أوحي إليك من ربك لا إله إلا هو وأعرض عن المشركين. Follow what has been revealed to you from your Lord. There is no one worthy of worship except Him. وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And turn away from the mushrikeen. This is one of the ways of how to turn away from the mushrikeen, is not to insult what they invoke besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also زَيَّنَّا كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُم. This is how we adorned or made fair seeming for every nation their doings. Also that has relationship with the verse 107, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, they would have not committed shirk, associating partners with Allah. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, as you see here in the Tafseer, يَنْهَى اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forbidding the believers, because it says وَلَا تَسُبُّوا, and do not تَسُبُّوا, revile, insult. So this is nahi, this is forbidden, something that is forbidden for the believers. عن أمر كان جائزا بل مشروعا في الأصل. And forbidding them from something that was permissible, but rather mashru'an, that means it's valid in its original form. وهو سب آلهة المشركين, which is insulting the aliha, or these idols that the mushrikeen they worship besides Allah. التي اتخذت أوثانا وآلهة مع الله, the ones that are been taken, اتخذت أوثانا, idols and gods with Allah. التي يتقرب إلى الله بإهانتها وسبها. The fact that these aliha, or these gods that they invented, that they worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يتقرب in the passive tense, that to seek closeness to Allah by ridiculing it and insulting it, because this is falsehood, this is evil, this is a crime. But even though this is the case, ولكن لما كان هذا السب, but because since that sab, that insulting, طريقا إلى سب المشركين, is a path, is a way for the mushrikeen, for their sab, their insulting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لرب العالمين. They would insult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or say bad things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a form of retaliation. الذي يجب تنزيه جنابه العظيم عن كل عيب, where it's an obligation to make tanzih, to exalt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to push away any thing that less than to perfectness when it comes to attributing anything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Janabihi, al-janab is the status, is one's level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. عن كل عيب, from every عيب, from every deficiency, any afa, any weakness, any wrongdoing, fault. وَسَبٍّ وَقَدْحٍ, and sab, again reviling, insulting, and qadh is to attack someone. So part of the belief is to make tanzih of Allah. Tasbih, that's the meaning of the tasbih. You say it with your own speech, with your own actions, and also one of which is to do the best you can that nobody would say anything bad about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you are the reason why people they insult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's haram. Even if you said what you said is correct in principle. So because of that, نهى الله عن سب آلهة المشركين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of that, He forbade the believers from insulting the aliha, the idols that the mushrikeen they worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لأنهم يحمون لدينهم, because they would get their الحمية or protection, that feel of they want to protect their religion ويتعصبون له, and they become so prejudiced to their falsehood that they're upon. لأن كل أمة زين الله لهم عملهم, because every nation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adorned, made fair seeming for them their actions, عملهم. فرأوه حسنا, people would see their actions are good. وذبوا عنه, and they would defend it. And the ذب is to push away harm. ودافعوا بكل طريق, and they would protect it with every path and way. حتى إنهم, to the extent of which يسبون الله رب العالمين, they would even reach a state where they would say bad words about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the Alameen, الذي رسخت عظمته في قلوب الأبرار والفجار, which is His عظمة, His exaltation, رسخت الرسوخ, is well established in the hearts of the righteous ones and the wicked ones. إذا سب المسلمون آلهتهم, is if the Muslimun, they would, if they insult their aliha, then that would lead them to this evil act, even though they would claim, these mushrikeen, that they believe in Allah and they believe in the rububiyyah of Allah, and they would take these idols as an intercessors between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even with that and with their belief, they have no problem in even insulting or saying bad words about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because someone insulted their aliha. Which brings an important point here, right? As you see that it's forbidden. But when you think about it deeper, those who, we're not talking about, for example, atheists, because here, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, do not insult those who they invoke besides Allah. So if someone worships something besides Allah, that means they believe in Allah, right? So they believe in the creator of the heavens and the earth. And almost all of them, they believe that the creator, these things that they worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it gets them closer to Allah, things like this. So how can they allow themselves or allow others to insult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is against their own false beliefs. But at the same time, it shows that if there is anyone to be protected from being insulted, meaning with regards to the one that they worship, there is none but the Muslimin. Why? Because the Muslimin are the only ones among the disbelievers, those who worship where everyone, those who worship anyone, the Muslimin are the only ones that they worship the Rabb of the Alameen. Where the disbelievers, they believe in Rabb al-Alameen, but they don't worship Him. So how can they insult Rabb al-Alameen when they believe in Him? Right? For example, if you take an example like the Christians, for example. Of course, a Muslim, if he, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, say something bad about Isa alayhi salam, he's a kafir. He becomes a disbeliever because Isa alayhi salam is a messenger of Allah. Right? But if, say, for example, he insulted or he said something where we are forbidden to insult and we are commanded, وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي أَحْسَنَ, the people of the book especially, you do not speak to them or you do not debate with them except with what is best. Right? So, and the da'wah and the leniency and the goodness, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded, not as a way of being deceiving them. No, this is deen, this is a religion that you're doing that from a religious perspective. But what I'm saying is just for the point that I wanted to make here with this sentence mentioned, how can they would insult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they believe in Him, even if they believe in a distorted way. This is something that is against their own belief. And this is one of the great meanings of the Tawheed, that also one of the signs that for others to see that how Al-Islam is the religion of the truth, in which everyone else, they invented something. And the deen of Al-Islam is calling everyone to go back and worship none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. He says, وَلَكِنَّ الْخَلْقَ كُلَّهُمْ مَرْجِعُهُم وَمَآلُهُم إِلَى اللَّهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. All of the khalq, all of the creation of Allah, their marji', they return all of them and their final abode al-ma'al to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of al-qiyamah, in the day of resurrection. يعرضون عليه, they will be presented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وتعرض أعمالهم, and their actions will be presented. They will be presented and their actions will be presented. فينبئهم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will inform them بما كانوا يعملون من خير وشر, with what they used to do, whether it's good or evil. He says here at the end, وفي هذه الآية الكريمة, in this blessed ayah, دليل للقاعدة الشرعية. In the tafsir, as we mentioned before, make sure that the major things, the principles, the laws and the rules that are detected, or he would mention it in the tafsir, we need to remember that with its evidence. Right? So what is this qa'idah al-shar'iyya? What is this principle, religious principle that is to be understood from this ayah? وهو أن الوسائل تعتبر بالأمور التي توصل إليها. This is a very important principle in the deen of Islam, that the ulama, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon them, they would follow in some of the things that might not be clear to many people. That al-wasail, the means, al-wasail is the plural of the wasila. The means, tu'tabar. The means are to be recognized, are to be understood, because there are so many means to many different things. So what is the proper wasila? What is the proper means versus what is not permissible mean? So one of the ways to understand when it comes to the wasila, to the means for an objective, is تعتبر بالأمور التي توصل إليها. What these means are going to lead to. Some people, they just focus on the means, but the mean is a mean. So what is it leading you to? Is it going to be the end and the outcome of it something good or something evil? The mean might be good, but it leads to something evil. That means the mean is evil. Even though in principle this mean is good, maybe in a different circumstances, in different environment. So that's why الوسائل تعتبر بالأمور التي توصل إليها. It is to be recognized for a person to see what this mean is going to lead to. وأن وسائل المحرم ولو كانت جائزة, and the means to the haram, even if it was permissible, تكون محرمة as a result of that principle. Then it becomes haram. The mean to something haram, even though the mean might not be haram, then this mean that is not haram becomes haram. Not in principle, but because it's a mean to something haram. إذا كانت تفضي إلى الشر, if it leads to the shar or to the evil. And this is a principle that means many things can be applied when it comes to these principles. So something permissible leads to something haram, then it's haram to take that means. And of course, the other principle, which is a very obvious one, that al-wasail لها حكم المقاصد. Al-wasail, the means, has to have the same rulings as the maqasid, as the objectives. So if the objective is haram, then the mean to it is haram, right? And if the objective is halal, right, the mean to it has to be halal. So you cannot take a haram mean to achieve something halal, right? Someone wants to feed the poor, halal objective, perfect, mashallah, great. Okay, let's a person would suggest, let's have a concert and we sell tickets, and we, from these tickets, we'll all give it to the poor. So the objective, the goal is the poor get fed, and there's great benefits as a result of that, and we can give it to the masjid to build the masjid and all kinds of things. But the wasila, the mean is haram. So that means the objective becomes haram. Don't look at the objective only, because the means has to also go in the same ruling as the objective. If the mean is haram, this is obvious. If the mean is halal, but it leads to haram, the mean is halal. Halal mean, as the example that I keep on mentioning because it's in the books of fiqh. For you to sell makeup, right? For people to grow grapes, all of that is halal, right? But someone is going to, you know for sure that in that town, if you sell grapes, all of it is going to be used for wine. Then it's haram for you to grow grapes in that case, because you know for sure. And again, you know for sure that this is going to happen. Selling guns, to criminals. Right? Selling guns is halal, no problem, especially if it's legal in the place that you live in. But you know that you're going to sell it to criminals to kill people, then it's haram for you to sell these guns to these criminals if you know that for sure that they're going to use it for something haram, and so on. So not every halal wasila, not every halal means is permissible. And this ayah brings this qaida, this amazing principle, and of course it has details to it. And anything that leads to haram is haram. So to understand that and to look at the end result of things, right? So for a person to be aware of this. For example, men and women are together mixing, even though that it's haram in its principle, but also sometimes things might not be clear to many people, and sometimes the haram or the objective that is haram, it's rarely to happen, right? So that means then you cannot say that the means are forbidden. As the example, for example, as I mentioned earlier, if someone grow grapes, there's nothing wrong with growing grapes. But what if you grow grapes in a very good environment, no problem whatsoever? But someone might send someone to send another person to send it to another country that maybe that if these grapes are sold to them, then maybe after some time they would. That's none of your business, because this is something that is rarely to happen, something that is strange, something that is rare, right? So this is have to be also to be considered. How is it that is attached the means to the objectives? But when something is the norm, or this is what is more likely to happen, then of course this is an obvious thing. And that's why to recognize these types of things and to present the matter in the proper way, then to leave the people of knowledge to give these especially rulings when it's changing according to the different environments and the different ways and things like this. So, but again, going back to the verse, and this is the principle that is mentioned in the verse, وَلَا تَسُبُّوا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbidding the believers from insulting the idols that the disbelievers worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, the kuffar, the idol worshippers, would curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adwan. This is transgression from them. When you did it, it was not necessarily something bad, but because of that leads to something very evil, then it's not permissible. So that's why a person has to be careful, even in the context of da'wah. Right? If someone insults the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, you cannot prevent this. But if you are the means for it, you instigated something that people would say something bad about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, you're responsible. If you are forbidding an evil with words, but it's more likely that if you say it in a certain way, they would commit more evil. Someone says to people, for example, do not drink, it's haram. And they would say, okay, that's what you're saying, then they'll drink more, for example. But it's very sometimes difficult to judge this matter, but to understand this principle, and it does not leave the person without, of course, enjoining good and forbidding evil. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that he is cursed, the one that man sabba waliday, the one that would curse his parents. So they said, Ya Rasulullah, وَكَيْفَ يَسُبُّ الرَّجُلُ وَالِدَيْهِ? O Prophet of Allah, how can a man curse his father or mother? So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, يَسُبُّ أَبَا الرَّجُلِ فَيَسُبَّ أَبَاهُ وَيَسُبَّ أُمَّهُ فَيَسُبُّ أُمَّهُ. That means a man would curse, insult another man's father. So this man that was insulted, he would, in retaliation, he would insult and revile the first one's father. So that means the first one, he was the reason for his own parents to be cursed. So he is, as a result of that, he's cursed. He committed a major sin. Because how can someone curse his parents? How evil that is. So it's not just by you saying it, but you can let people to say it. But if people would say it anyway, then you have no responsibility for it. So again, it goes with one's actions. And then the other meaning here, كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُم. This is how every nation has been, the evil has been adorned of their actions. To have and to understand that this is zayyanna. The adornment of things is different than the core of the thing. You can have poison, you can have something so evil, but you cover it. Zina is the cover. So you cover it with something that looks good. So people get deceived. Because there's no evil would show its real face and real form. As the Jannah and the Hellfire. The Jannah is covered with hardship, and the hellfire is covered with lusts and desires. So this is the zina. And a person would say, but if every nation, their actions has been adorned for them, then it becomes very difficult. Yes, unless they are truthful with their own selves, unless they seek the truth, unless they go to the wahy from Allah. Because human beings, they have the ability and the capacity to look beyond the zina, to look beyond the adornment and the covering of things. And they understand that very well, sugarcoating things. They have the ability to see things. And when it comes to the haqq and the batil, when it comes to the truth and falsehood, right, don't be distracted by the zina. So adorning houses and so on with decorations and Christmas and so on, a person would say that looks beautiful. But what's the essence of it? Where's it coming from? By cursing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and attributing a son to him? Right? So this is, don't be distracted by the zina, but the outside appearance of things. So, and the same thing, the halal and the haram. How people would justify evil actions for themselves, and it will become fair seeming to them. So how to protect oneself from such a misery is to hold fast strongly to the wahy from Allah, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. How the people, the bid'ah innovations is adorned to them so much. They think that this is such a great means to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is something that the Prophet ﷺ didn't do. So you have a principle that you follow, and so on. ثم إلى ربهم مرجعهم, and everyone shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فينبئهم بما كانوا يعملون, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would inform them of what they used to do, and then as a result of that, the reward and the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he said, with كذلك زينا لكل أمة عملهم, he said, زينا لأهل الطاعة الطاعة ولأهل الكفر الكفر. We made the people of obedience to Allah, the act of obedience, good. We adorned it for them, and we made the people of disbelief, the disbelief, to be adorned for them. So to be consistent in the ta'ah, so that it becomes the beautiful thing in one's life, and to be steadfast upon it for the sake of Allah. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala, because of the time, and the attendance code is وَلَا تَسُبُّوا, and do not insult. And do not insult. And by the way, insult is not necessary. A Muslim is not fahish. The Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, they never said vulgar words. A sab here is when you say that this is falsehood, that this is nonsense. This is sab. This is considered to be insult, not what is understood for a person to use evil words and vulgar words and things like this. طيب, وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. And inshallah, if there's any questions, please, tonight inshallah, or tomorrow night inshallah, we can try to answer. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.